Picture it, a packed congressional hearing. The air is thick with tension. In the audience are survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse, watching, waiting for some semblance of justice. A lawmaker channeling the public's rage finally asks the nation's top law enforcement officer the question everyone wants answered. How many of Epstein's co-conspirators have you actually indicted? The question just hangs there, and the Attorney General's response, she starts yelling about the stock market. That's the story that would and should have ripped across the internet. It's a moment of political deflection so absurd, so shameless, it feels like something out of a movie. The story of how an Attorney General supposedly used the Dow Jones to dodge questions about the Epstein scandal. But if I told you that entire scene, the hearing, the Attorney General, the explosive quote you might imagine in headlines, is a work of fiction. Now stick with me, because in the video we're going to use this powerful made-up scenario to break down something that is very, very real. We'll look at the story that's easy to get angry about, and then we'll expose the far more subtle and frankly more insidious ways that power actually deflects accountability. The truth isn't a shouting match about stocks, it's a masterclass in bureaucratic warfare designed to leave victims in the dark and the public chasing ghosts. Hey guys, I just wanted to take a break real quick and thank one of our sponsors, Mint Mobile. I don't really use sponsors much, but I am 100% behind Mint. I have been a customer of theirs. That's the only reason I recommend them for almost 10 years now. I was one of the first Mint mobiles. In fact, it used to be called Mint SIM when I signed up for it. It is the best phone plan I have ever had. I use the prepaid, and that's the one I've linked down there. I use the 1-year plan. It gives you a certain amount of gigabytes per month. You could change it. It comes to about $300 a year, which I pay all at once. You get a big savings if you pay all at once, 12 months, and I don't have to worry about it again. If you want a great phone plan with great coverage and doesn't hit the wallet too hard, sign up for Mint Mobile. Okay, let's get back to the show. Let's start by building a hypothetical scene. The date is February 11th, 2026. The fictional Attorney General, let's call her Pam Bondi, is appearing before the House Judiciary Committee. The backstory is explosive. Her Department of Justice has missed a deadline to release unredacted Epstein files, a deadline set by a law we'll call the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Even worse, the documents they did release were a mess. Victims' names accidentally exposed while powerful names stayed hidden behind black bars. Survivors are in the room. Their presence a silent, powerful indictment of the system's failure. The pressure is on. The hearing is a slugfest from the jump. But the moment that would have gone viral, the one that would define the public's memory, comes when the questions hit the nerve. Representative Jerry Nadler asked the simple, devastating question, how many of Epstein's co-conspirators have been indicted? According to the legend we're exploring, this is when Bondi just crashes out. Instead of answering, the real answer would be 0. She supposedly erupts with a tirade that has nothing to do with anything. The quote that would have echoed across the internet is a stunner. The Dow is over 50,000. I don't know why you're laughing. The story would continue with her turning on another committee member, Jamie Raskin, and saying, "You're a great stock trader, as I had heard, Raskin. The S&P at almost 7,000 and the NASDAQ smashing records. That's what we should be talking about." It's the perfect encapsulation of political evasion. A public official faced with questions about a monstrous sex trafficking ring pivots to 401ks. The narrative is crystal clear. She's using the booming stock market as a shield to hide her department's failures and protect the powerful. It's simple, it's outrageous, and it would confirm every suspicion people have about justice being political. But this is where our thought experiment gets interesting, because if this were a real event, the next step would be to watch the tape, and if we did, we'd discover the viral story. The Dow Jones outburst is a red herring. In a more realistic telling of this hearing, the chaos would be real, but the tactics would be different. Detailed accounts wouldn't focus on a single bizarre quote about the stock market. They'd describe her dismissing the Democratic questions as theatrics and calling the hearing a circus. She'd accuse lawmakers of being obsessed with the president and attack them personally, maybe calling a respected congressman a washed-up loser lawyer. Those are potent deflections for sure, but they're a different beast. They are about discrediting the questionnaire and destroying the process itself, and that's a critical distinction. The Dow story is about changing the subject. The circus narrative is about burning the whole big top down. So why did the fictional Dow story feel so plausible? Because it's a better story. It's tangible, absurd, and easy to mock. A politician screaming about stock prices to avoid talking about sex crimes is a perfect memeable moment. Requires zero understanding of procedural rules or congressional oversight. But the truth of how these deflections actually work reveals a strategy that's far more dangerous. So if she didn't use a bizarre stock market rant, how would an AG like the one in our scenario actually bury the Epstein scandal in that hearing room? She'd use a three-pronged strategy: weaponize bureaucracy, launch partisan attacks, and maybe even flash a chilling threat of surveillance. First, procedural obstruction. When asked direct questions like how many co-conspirators are being investigated, the number one tactic is to refuse to answer by citing ongoing investigations. This is the classic Washington two-step. Sounds responsible, but it's an iron shield against accountability. She would praise the president for signing our fictional Transparency Act, creating the illusion of cooperation while actively fighting its purposes at every turn. It's the appearance of transparency while practicing total obstruction. Second, she wouldn't just change the subject, she'd attack the premise of the question. Every inquiry about the DOJ's failures would be reframed as a partisan hit job. She'd accuse Democrats of having Trump derangement syndrome and performing theatrics. When asked to simply turn and apologize to the survivors in the room, she'd refuse, dismissing the request as a stunt. This is incredibly effective because it shifts the entire conversation from substance to politics. The story is no longer DOJ fails victims, but it becomes partisan bickering in Congress. She's not just deflecting, she's poisoning the well. But the third and most disturbing tactic would be revealed not by what she said, but what was on her desk. Imagine photojournalists capturing an image of the briefing binder, and on one page a heading is visible: Jayapal Pramila search history. A list of documents a specific representative had searched while reviewing the Epstein files in a secure facility. Let that sink in. The Department of Justice tracking the research of the very members of Congress charged with overseeing it. That goes beyond deflection. It's intimidation. It sends a message to anyone digging for the truth: we are watching you. It would transform the story from incompetence and bickering to something far more sinister. The real takeaway? So no, Pam Bondi did not have a hearing on February 11, 2026. She's not the Attorney General, and she never used the Dow Jones to bury the Epstein scandal. But the fictional scenario we just walked through shows us something vital. The work of burying a scandal is rarely done with a single dramatic outburst. It's buried under claims of pending litigation. It's buried under accusations of theatrics and partisan name-calling. And it's buried under the chilling threat that if you ask too many questions, you'll end up being the one investigated. The imagined story of a stock market rant is compelling, but it's a dangerous distraction. It's dangerous because it makes us look for the cartoon villain, causing us to miss the very real and effective methods happening in plain sight. Accountability rarely dies in a blaze of glory. It's quietly choked out by procedure. It's delegitimized by political theater, and it's intimidated into silence. The real scandal is always the one that's harder to fit into a headline. It's the methodical dismantling of oversight. It's the contempt shown not just to lawmakers, but to the survivors, who in our story and in real life are still waiting to be heard by their own Department of Justice. That's why it's so critical to look past the viral clips and the outrage of the day. We have to understand the boring procedural ways that power protects itself. Because if we only focus on the imagined over-the-top villainy, we will absolutely miss the real happening right in front of us. If you want to see more breakdowns of the real tactics behind the political theater, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. And tell me in the comments what other political maneuvers or media narratives have you seen that deserve a much deeper look. What story have you seen told that just doesn't feel right? Let's talk about it. Thanks for watching The Spin Cycle.